in the first chapter of Genesis. So we're going to continue on that first chapter of Genesis, the creation account, the biblical creation account. Because the reason I said this is because, as you see earlier, there are all kinds of other kind of stories that mankind, different cultures have parlayed against the Genesis account in order to discount the Genesis account, or better yet, to discount God. But in today's lesson, we're going to be looking at, I think, primarily day 4 and day 5 of the creation. They might even get into day 6 on the last day of the God's creation. So that we're going to just do some readings first before we get to the Genesis account. Genesis 1:14 through 25, probably to I should say the end of the chapter probably. But that means we'll run over to next week a little bit. But if we get there, we might continue our reading. Pardon me.
Yeah, next week is 26, and then it spills over to chapter 2.
Yeah. So let's go to word in prayer first. Oh, Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for your blessings, for life itself, and for the reminder that your word tells us that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. And Father, we come to rest in the privilege to be here this morning as part of your creation, but more than that, Father, we are a new creation in Christ. And we do best and we praise and magnify your holy name. We ask you to give us enlightenment by your Holy Spirit, Father, that you open our hearts and our minds and we learn and apply to our lives and we glorify you and lift you up and praise you for your glorious, magnanimous creation, for who you are. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Our first reading this morning, we're going to look at Psalms 8, verses 3 and 4. We're going to have just a very few readings this morning before we go to the lesson itself. And hopefully this one won't be as long before you either. So it is Psalms 8, verses 3 through 4. Psalms 8, 3 and 4. And it says, and when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him? And the Son of Man that you care for him. Amen. Let's go to Genesis. Let's go to Psalms 33.
I think about that a lot. Sorry to cut you off, but I think about that so much. It's like that God did all this, and yet He still comes to think about us.
It's amazing. That's what we call, basically what we call in some terms grace. That's just the loving kindness and graciousness of God that made us for Himself and for His good pleasure. And that is why it is important that we do take hold of that, take stock of that, that we are in our lowly state just dust, but nevertheless God loves us and cares for us. But more than that, though, God is not only, if you look at this put it into context, today's lesson, God not only made us from the dust of the earth and then called us a living soul, but He gave this created order for us to be co-regents with Him, to be His manservants here on earth, to maintain and to control and to subdue the earth that He made. All the great things that we've been talking about the last 2 weeks, God gave it to the hands of man to be His playing field, or that's what we want to say, playing field, or His battleground, or whatever you want to call it. But nevertheless, that if you make that contrast, the greatness and the magnanimity of God and us as humans and mankind, and the things that we do, especially in light of the fact of our fallen nature, and how we have so abused God's creation, but nevertheless, God has turned those things over into our hands to subdue for a season. And I say for a season because He will come back one day, and we have to give an account for our stewardship of His heavenly and earthly creation that He has given to us. So that is a lot, and it's very. If you think about it, it's very humbling. If you really think about how grand that is, it is extremely humbling that God saw fit to give that to mankind for His usage and for His and for his will and for his goodness. But we have abused it so against God, and we are constantly, as I say all the time, we are constantly eclipsing God's glory by trying to steal, quote unquote, the famous thing these days is chance, which is nothing. Chance means nothing. Chance is really a mathematical probability. Chance is nothing. Chance never created anything. Chance can't create anything because chance is not a force. Chance is not a life being. But what we call creation, evolution mean. But that's another story. But I won't get into that because that we could be on that for days. And in log jam arguments and never get anywhere. But at any rate, I believe the biblical account, not only because it's historical and it's rational and reasonable and you can defend it, but I believe because the Holy Spirit has endowed my heart, my mind to accept it on faith that God is who he say he is. Psalms 33 verses 6 through 9. It said, by the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their host. He gathers the waters of the sea as a heap. He puts the depths in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spoke and it came to be. He commanded and it stood firm. And what I want us to, if you look at what we just read, we discussed it in great detail last week. But we're going to carry on with that same theme again today. But I want to draw your attention to the very last two verses of the Psalms 33 verses 8 and verse 9. And it says, let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him, in awe of God. For he spoke, and we went in detail last week about God created out of nothing by divine fiat. When God speaks, and he is the only being that has power to create by the very essence of his word. We don't have that, and in spite of what some people would teach you, that there's life and death in your words. Yes, there is life and death in your word, but not in the same sense that God has life. You can't command anything and make it happen unless God has ordained it. And even then, you don't create something from nothing. When God commanded it, he created something from nothing. There was nothing there. So anyway, I won't talk about that later on. And what I want to really draw your attention to is this last verse, verse 9. For he spoke and it came to be. And you remember when we talk about that God creating out of by divine fiat out of nothing. It says when he spoke it, we said last week, God gave a command, and then there was the after effect that it took place. It performed. It became a performative thing. God, by his words, can perform things. We call it performative factors. You know, God can perform it by actually saying it. But he says here that he commanded it, and it stood firm. We can talk about that later on because it's in today's lesson. And God spoke these words. He spoke it, and it didn't happen for the time being, but it happened that it was to happen forever. It was to happen on a permanent basis. It was fixed. It was set. It was bound. And that's really important that we understand when God told the seeds to go into where they were, the clouds, or whatever he created, when he said it was good, and when he said let it be, it was that way. And it was not just for the fluid moment, but on a permanent, fixed basis. Okay? So let's look at Genesis 1. We just go through the lesson. If you remember, we last time we did a lot of emphasis on day 1, day 2, and day 3. So today's lesson is really on the emphasis on, as I said to you earlier, the emphasis on day 4 and day 5. And next week we're going to be discussing, lesson next week will be on day 6 and 7 primarily. So let's look at Genesis 1 verses 15 through 26. Let's go back to 14 to pick it up and read carry through. And God said, "Let there be light in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and for years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens, to give light upon the earth. And it was so. He spoke it, and it was fixed. And God made the two great lights, the greater lights to rule by day, and the lesser lights to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens, and gave light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heaven. So God created the great sea creatures, and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kind, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kind. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kind, and the livestock according to their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw it, and God saw that it was good. Okay? We'll stop there, because I'm going to go into next week's lesson. So, and we see it again, as we said last week. We're going to reiterate this again. We always talk about time of a day from morning to evening. But as we see in the Christian count, it was just the opposite. It was from evening until morning, and God called it the first, the second, the third, whatever day. But in today's lesson also we see that God says 3 times, just in these passages, 3 times that it was good that he had made. So we said God gives a command by his voice. It is performed. It comes to pass. Number 2. And number 3, when he does that, he evaluates it. Not us. He evaluates it. And he determined that it was good. And because he said it was good, it is good. That's what I was saying. Whether we like it or not. God said it was good. And bear in mind that everything that he does, he says it's good. And we like to read it, and we as mankind, we like to define things as being good according to our view. As you can see in next week's lesson, at the end of God's culmination of creation, mankind's created, and he says it was good, very good. And what God has called good, we have called not good. Because we have predetermined in our narrow minds, in our great vast knowledge that we think we have, we have redefined and renamed it not good, but made something else and called it good. So we leave it at that. So let's go back to the top of the lesson. Verse 14, it says, but before I do that, let me ask you my question. I got only one question today. 2 or 3. One question. God, when God made the light, what day did he make it on? Remember we discussed it last week?
Thursday.
He made light on
the first day.
Oh.
Before there was a sun, before there was a moon, before there was the stars. In other words, before there were any illuminating bodies in the heavens, or before he made the heavens, he made light. Okay, because God is light. Okay, All right. So, but when he made the light, he gave it three functions. Based on today's lesson, we read it just a while ago. You tell me what those three functions are. He made it light to separate day from night. That's number one. Okay. What was the other thing he did?
To be um signs for sacred times, days and years.
So we call that he made light to dominate what? Day from day. Day from night, rather.
Seasons.
Spring from fall. Winter from summer. And
Years.
by the years. God made light to dominate the seasons, to dominate the day from the night, to be a separator again, to dominate. Light is to dominate. We determine years by light years. We determine days by the sunrise and sunset. Right? Seasons, the year. And we determine a year by the amount of time it takes the earth to rotate from one end of its axis to the other in a year's time. We call that a year. How many days? 365 days. We know that in 365 days, the earth is on its tilt as it goes from season to season, and then it goes back. That's a year. But it never said it here anywhere about a week. Why? Why do you think so?
Because there was no week yet.
Hmm?
There was no week yet.
Okay. There were days and there were nights. There were years and there were seasons. But you don't see anything here about a week. Why do you think? I mean, I'm asking. Why do you think that's so?
Because a week is something that man made, but based on the number of days that God took to make everything, and then on the seventh day rested.
Because he had already made that time span. It took how many days to create the earth? On what day he did what? The seventh he rested. So we already have 7 days, and we call that, men call that a week. So that's why. It's already there. And remember now, it's important to understand what God allows man to name and what God names. Remember last week he said there were 5 things that God named. And later on, we see the rest of it is given to Adam and mankind to name. Mankind, in the expanse that God gave him for measuring time, he looked back and saw what God had done. He called it a week. God gave the seasons. God gave the year. Gave the day from the evening from the night rather. But man named the week, looking back on God's created works and his resting on that Sabbath day. Okay. So he said here in 14, he let that light above the expanse of the heaven to separate the day from the night. So we know that he separates day from night by the light before the natural lights were created, okay? Then he said, and let them be signs. And he said, when he said signs, he goes on to tell you what those signs are going to be. Signs for what? For seasons. We got 4 seasons on the earth. Winter, spring, summer, fall. I'm going to call it the equinoxes, how you get all that fancy stuff, you know. And it says, and for the day, for the year. Like I said to you earlier, we know that it takes that for the earth to rotate completely around the sun. It's 365 days before we call it a year. Then it retreats. So another year. Okay? And let them be lights. Then that's what he says here. And let them, after he created these things, he said, let them be for light in the expanse of the heaven. You see where God makes a change there? He was the light. Now he says, now let these created illuminating bodies be for light. Okay. And it says, and it was so. And God fixed it so. That's why recurring day after day, season after season, year after year, we see the same things happen over and over again. because those things are fixed. And it says, and let them be for light. And it says, and God said, and God made, rather, he says, and God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule by day, and the lesser light to rule by night. And I like the old version where it says, and he also made the stars. Mine doesn't say that, it says, and the stars. Okay. So what do we call those two bodies? It made a lesser light and a greater light.
The sun and the moon.
The sun and the moon. He didn't call them sun and the moon. We call them sun and the moon. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He said a lesser light and a greater light. And then it says, and he also made the stars. I don't know why he said that. That is typical of Genesis on their just say the lack of hyperbole or the lack of speaking large about things that are so great, which Moses is known for all of his writings. He's so understating things. And he also made the stars. I don't know why he said that.
Because the stars wasn't a separator, like the sun and the moon.
You saying why did he ask for the stars?
Let's read it. And it says, and God said, and God made the two great lights.
Right.
The greater light to rule by day, which we call the sun, and the lesser light to rule by night, we call the moon. And some versions say, and he also, like an afterthought, and he also made the stars. Wonder why I said that. Tim, what do you think?
Why did he say we like as an addition to he made the stars?
Mm-hmm.
So it could be complete. So the light and the day. You could know that the when he said he let there be the verse you just read, and God said let there be light and God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. Well, the lesser light is the darkness. But
It's the moon.
it's the moon. The lesser light, well, we might say that the lesser light is darkness, but it is the moon, but it's the moon which illuminates the sky at night. So maybe addition to the moon, the stars also. That's my
It seems that he gives us a purpose for the moon, and he gives us a purpose for the sun, and those are great purposes. And he gives us no purpose for the stars.
Okay.
So he gives us a sun and a moon to do certain things, and he also gives us more light, the
Right.
stars.
Yeah. What he's saying, this is an argument from greater to lesser. We call it in philosophy, from lesser to greater. He tells you about the great things. And it's easy for us to always concentrate on the big things and forget about the small things. But the small things are important too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The stars, do you know that actually the stars are expansive, bigger than the sun and the moon.
Right.
And we only know that now because of Hubble.
Mm-hmm.
Hubble every other month now. You hear the latest thing they got. Supposedly there are 50 billion, not million, 50 billion galaxies besides the Milky Way.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Hubble says there are at least 50 billion additional galaxies besides the galaxy that we live in, called the solar system, which is very expansive and very big. And you think about all those stars. But it's another reason too Moses did this. Bear in mind that they're in a pagan culture. And remember, in Mesopotamia, in the Udaric cultures, they always worshiped the illuminating bodies, the sun or the moon, and also the stars. He says, by the way, those God made too. He didn't just make Ra, your sun god that you worship. He didn't just make your moon god that you worship, but he also, those other bodies you see from distance, he made them too.
Yeah.
They all belong to him. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. The world and they that dwell therein. He said all of it belongs to God. By the way, he made that too. Okay? And it says, the next one it says, and God, verse 17, and God set the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. Now it says, remember I said before, on the first day he made light, there was light before there were illuminating bodies. Now he's saying, now that I made the greater moon, the greater sun, the lesser moon, and the stars, those will be in the expanse now to give you light. But God still is light. But he's now saying that the earth will be lit by those illuminating bodies. So that's the second purpose we talked about earlier. The third purpose of the light. He gave three reasons for the light. He gave the light, first of all, to separate day from night. Then to set the seasons, day, space, and time, and everything. And 9 says to illuminate or elucidate the earth, the expanse. Now to illuminate. And it says, and there, 18. Let me read that again. 18. To rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. Okay. Which was what we said earlier. God not only divinely creates by his word, then it comes to pass. Then he does what with it?
Say that.
Evaluate.
He evaluates it.
Right.
And he has determined that it is good. Okay? And there was evening, and here we'll give this phrase again. Days don't start in the morning. And there was evening, and there was morning.
Which is what
And he repeats it every single day he makes great. There was evening, and then there was morning.
But we changed it up, and we said that the morning is that the day starts in the morning and goes to the evening.
That's the world we live in.
That's the world we live in.
But when God made the world and when he evaluated it, how he determined it, he says the opposite. And that's why we, as we said earlier, it's one reason why the Jews began their worship in the evening, not the morning. At sunset, that day began. That day began. Their worship begins.
Yeah.
And it says, 20. And God said, let the waters swarm with swarming and living creatures. Let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. And so God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Okay. Now, if you look back now, so far we dealt with 5 days of creation. On the first day, God made what?
Light.
He made the light. But on day 4, he did what?
On day 4, he made the moon and the sun and stars.
He gave the illuminating bodies. On day 3, God made the earth. But on day 6, what did he do?
That's
The
what
stars.
That's when he made man and the creatures. Finished up the creatures. On day 5, he populated what he had made. We just see a while ago where it says that he's filled the seas with swarming things. As I told you last week, God does everything progressively in an orderly fashion to sustain itself, bit by bit, before showing the complete picture. We see the incremental stages of how he did creation. He made the lights before he made plants. Well, science would have a history with that, because they said it has to be photosynthesis to have plants. Well, God is light. And all you need for photosynthesis is what? Heat and what?
And light.
And heat and light. God is light. Where there's light, there is heat. Always. Maybe cool heat, but there's heat. And it says, He's filled the earth, the seas with the swarming things. And he goes, and what the writer here goes on to say is that he fills it with all the living creatures in the sea. Not only made to swarm, but to move about with density and population. What we see here is diversity and complexity. This is so diverse in his creative order, in his creative being, things. But it's so complex how he made it. He created living, swimming things in the ocean. And he also talked about the sea creatures. We call the monsters or the dinosaurs. We call, or if you look at the word, according to Hebrew scholars, the word they use for that creatures is referring to what we call dinosaurs. Not just Leviathan, as Job talks about, but things even bigger than Leviathan. Not just the big whale or the hippo, whatever, but things that's so massive that we don't even know. But you remember now again, Moses put this in here because he lived in a culture where people always believed that there was another evil force in the sea that controlled the sea. Where did we get Poseidon from? Poseidon?
From
Neptune, Poseidon. Neptune is what? Roman. Poseidon is Greek. Same difference.
Yeah.
What's the opposite? Whatever it is. Because they believe that those were forces great as God. But Moses is telling them again, even when you see those creatures that you say are evil beasts that control the seas, God controls the sea. God made them to play in the sea, not to rule the sea. Because he rules the sea, and they don't rule him. They're not forced to be worshipped or to be honored as they do. So he said he filled all the seas with swarming things. Everything therein, and he made it. He made it as a playground for them. And it says, verse 20. But I'm going to go back to that verse what it says, because it starts talking about something here. It says, look at verse 21 again, last part of it. To move in the waters of the storm, according to their kind. This is the diversity. Now, we would listen to all this stuff. We were taught, you're still teaching today in school, by evolution and everything else. All these different kinds of, we call class, phyla, order, and all that kind of stuff. We would have said that it was so many billions of years, the Cambrian age, the whatever, all kind of ages they got. This was evolved and this evolved. God created it, and it didn't have to evolve. He created it and placed it there. It was already evolved. Was not? I know that's the wrong word. Already made. The word bara, made. Already created. He put it in the sea. There was an evolution there that we love to talk about in science. And even, well, I almost got into the thing that we call theistic evolutions also, which I think is a bunch of nonsense too, but I won't get into that. Okay. But however it says here, after their own kind. Every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw it was good. Verse 22. Verse 22. And God blessed them. You know what it says? Bless them. Now remember now, this is just the created order. And man is not here yet. But still God blessed his creation.
Yeah.
How did he bless them?
By telling them to multiply.
By telling them to do what?
Multiply.
He gave them reproductive powers. He gave them reproductive powers to produce after their kind, to fill and to multiply his creation. But also, I want you to look at what it says here. Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the sea, and let birds multiply on the earth. Now we see how the birds, all the different kinds of birds and species fly from place to place, over the waters, or whatever. But you never see a bird makes his nest in the water. does it on land. May do it near water, above water, but he does it on land, on some hard substance, because he has to have somewhere to build his nest, to lay his eggs, or the birds do. But when they do, what they do, they fill the expanse. They fly to and fro, hither and thither. All kinds of birds, all kinds of species. From some of them fly for thousands of miles across the globe, from place to place. Because God has given the reproductive power of his creation to reproduce and to multiply. He blessed it to fill it. And he said, 23, and there was again evening and morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kind. Living stock, livestock rather, and creeping things, and the beasts of the earth according to their kind. Then he goes and says, not just for the seas, but for the ground, he says, let there be two kinds of animals. What kind did he say here? What we call by today's words?
Cattle, which is maybe like a cow or something.
Which is what?
Livestock.
Like livestock.
Which is what?
A cow?
A cow.
So, I mean, I'm trying to, what do you So wait a minute.
Let me help you out here. He built livestock as opposed to the tiger in the woods. I'm trying to get you to two things.
Oh.
He made wild animals and he made domesticated animals to play on this ground.
Right.
See the diversity again? See the complexity again? But we all live in some sort of symbiosis, some sort of harmony to keep God's created order going. How complex it is and how diverse it is. He created the tame animals and we say in our words, the tame and the wild. Or domesticated and the undomesticated. According to their kind. And it was so. And it says here in verse 25, according to this kind, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. Everything, including the spider, the snake, the snails, the ants, all that stuff that we don't like, scared of, whatever. Because God has a place for everything in this great diversity of his. And that's what we call the universe, because of all the diversity. All the complexity and the diversity that we call the universe. And it says, and God saw that it was good. God keeps on saying, he keeps on evaluating himself.
Everything he does.
Everything he does.
Every phase.
It was good.
He evaluates and says that it is good.
But we like to say, what we like to always say, what we don't like is not being good. We don't determine what's good and what's beautiful. God has already determined that. God determines what's good. God determines what's beautiful. Our last verse. And God said. No, that was our last verse, wasn't it? Never mind. We won't get into that either for next week. So, I want you to see the connection between how God made the light to have three dominions, three kinds of functions. What were those functions again? He made the light on the first day, of course, but then he made the luminaries, or the illuminating bodies, and he had them to have a function. What were those functions again? To separate the day from the night.
To seasons.
To say seasons. And years. Days and years.
And to give
but
light
not
to
weeks. Because weeks was what we determined after looking back on God's creation. Okay? And what was the last one he did?
To give light to the earth.
To illuminate the world. He gave it to separate light from darkness. Then he gave him to dominate the seasons, the years, the days. Then he gave him to illuminate the created order. Those three things he gave for life. And when everyone wants to tell you about how evolution had to be light for you, I always remind them that God made light on the very first day. God himself is light. And that's why there can be life. Where there's life, there's light. Where there's light, there's life.
So if I missed that part, but you said that one of the functions of the light was to separate
Day from night.
the day and the years.
And it's it says for seasons, for signs, and then he explains what those signs are for years, seasons, and what else did they?
Days.
Days. Years, seasons, and days. We know it takes from what we call from sunset from sunrise to sunset. We know it takes
4 hours
4 hours that it rotates
to be another day.
to another day. And if we make a year, we know it takes what?
365 days.
We know it takes the Earth to rotate,
To rotate.
from one end of the axis it's on to the other, 365 days to make a year, and then it reverses itself. But in those gradations, there are seasons. If some phases on that equinox, it hits spring. Another phase that it hit, going down, where we in right now, we hit about to hit fall. And later on it's going to hit winter. And God, he said, and God made it so, he fixed it. It became permanent for this time that he declared. It won't go back. He made it permanent. He fixed it.
So when if the evening and the morning were one day, the first day, just say the first day, the names of the days of the week came later on.
That's
By
mankind.
mankind. But did they still keep were they keeping the evening and the day still in the Jewish
Jewish calendar? Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
as the first day? So what I'm saying is later on, when does it? The Bible doesn't tell you like later on when it changed, though, right?
What changed?
When we start doing it, like how, like we're saying.
I don't know. I don't know if it does or not.
Yeah.
I just know that it's important, and it never hit me till this series of lessons that I noticed for the first time after all my 45 years of reading the Bible. I never occurred to me that he said evening first as opposed to morning first, and he said that repeatedly every single day.
Yeah.
And when you look at Jewish history and look at the theology, you can understand why. We like to, and it's like everything we said he created in the very first chapter. It says he to create. Well, how did we make last week? He created the darkness from. How
He divided the light from the darkness.
right, but we don't do that either. You see how we turn things around? It says what?
He divided light
From the darkness. We call it darkness from light.
From the light.
Remember, and that's to me that's an irony in there. But there's something more profound there than just what on the surface. Why we do things the way we do and how we determine things. But we're looking at how God does things and how God has so named it. Because remember now, bear in mind, I said you before, God named only 5 bodies initially. Then he gave the rest to Adam and mankind to name. And what was the 5 things he named last week? Remember last week we talked about that? He named? But he knows how.
I wrote it down.
Day and night, the sky,
The sky,
the land, and the sea.
In heaven. It was 7 things, It was 7 things. And we thought it's about that completeness, that perfection. The 7 things that he named was what again? The heavens was in the middle.
Yep. I'm trying to remember if I had.
I'm not gonna tell you because you notes. Okay?
Is that
'Cause I don't
the
remember.
notes? I got it in
I
my
just
notes.
said them all. Well, I
Read
said
them
the
again,
5.
Shalante.
Day, night, the sky, the ground, or
The
you
earth.
call it
The
earth,
Earth.
sea.
He named them. God named them.
Right, he did.
Man didn't name those. God named
God
them.
named those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But back to your question. I'm not sure if we asked back to your question earlier though, because we're done. I'm getting kind of in here question. I forget, but I don't think we answered your question though.
No,
What was your
I
question?
was just thinking, if